live now. So, good morning. Good morning to David and Tim, and good morning to everybody listening to us or watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, also probably in Clubhouse as well. It's a pleasure to have you with us on this Wednesday morning. It is February the 26th, and we have a guest speaker who is with us for the very first time today. His name is David Price. I will let David introduce himself to you in a bit. But before that, of course, as you already know, I want to say a big thank you to our first sponsor that's Kanchu. Kanchu is known as Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku, and you can find them at kanachu.com online. So the thing here is that we always talk about them with a lot of affection and love because we have worked with James before and with the company as well. So the company is doing buying and selling real estate in Yokohama. They also do real estate investment and property management. So if you have any projects in these areas, please do not hesitate to contact james@kanachu.com. So thank you very much to James and Kanachu. And we once again go back. Tim, would you like to have a few words to say?
No, I was just saying James is the man, I mean, he's doing so well. I feel like a proud father almost because we knew him before he came here and we're watching him evolve in Japan. So he's a really good person. They're very honest and they know their stuff and they're in a good organization. So if I were buying land in that neck of the woods, I'd definitely go through them. So that's the only thing I wanted to add.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. This was my cat. All right. And so again, thank you very much, David.
Thank you for coming, David.
And welcome to this podcast for the first time. It is a great pleasure to have you with us because we're going to talk about a topic we have never talked about before here.
Yeah.
And this is mental wellness. So before we dive into this topic, I would like you to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your story in Japan or with Japan. So how you came here and how you actually transitioned into doing what you're doing right at this point.
Great. Thanks, Maya. Well, I was going to say to start off, I've been here 30 years. And in that 30 years, just touch on this, I've noticed it's hard to find good, competent real estate people that you can trust. So, that's kind of what I was thinking when I saw that lab. That wasn't a deal between us for me to say that before this.
We appreciate you saying that.
That's an honest thought I had. But I've been here 30 years. I've been in recruitment most of that time. I came here, I'll talk about this more later, but I came here like just about everyone else for 1 year and I'm still here. And just based upon my personality type, my interests that I've had for decades and my path, I've ended up in the mental wellness field. And I look forward to talking more about that today.
Well, great. So you mentioned that you have been in Japan for 30 years already. And right.
January 10th.
May I ask you how you came to the country, why you came? Because every one of us has a different story, right?
Yeah.
We came for different reasons. And I can say that nowadays, probably the percentage of people coming here because they love Japanese pop culture is higher. But I believe that back in the day, this wasn't really the case. So
we were here before it was cool, right, David?
Yeah.
We were here before Japan was cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't shy away from my story. I'm pretty frank about who I am and where I've been. When I was in my 20s, I was a bit of a wild boy, and I got into the party scene pretty heavily, and I got clean and sober when I was just before 30, and went back to college. My parents were very supportive of me, and I went back to college. I got a degree in elementary education, and I thought I was walking to class one day with a few people, and one of them said, "Yeah, I'm going to go to Japan and pay off my student debt, and just go have a great time." And I literally right then I thought, "Yeah, I'm going to do that." I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to Japan.
Uh,
I just started making a plan and did a lot of research and looked all over the world, and thought teaching English, and looked at teaching English here and there, and I thought I was going to be especially qualified because I was a education major. And anyway, I came over. That wasn't the case, by the way, and I came over again just for a year, just to experience a foreign country for a year, and I'm sure you could do a poll right now and ask viewers what kept me here, and they would all say he met his wife, and I did, and so met her, and it ended up.
It happens, doesn't it? Yeah.
Met her, and I
Right.
ended up staying, and I was tutoring when I was teaching English, but also tutoring kids at English International School for their studies, helping them with their homework.
What year was that, David? When you first came?
90, I came in 95, and I
Okay.
I think I taught English and tutored international school students through a guy named Patrick Newell, someone who's still my friend, a really very well known. I don't even know how to say what he does. He's an education guru, but he's got his finger in a lot of pies. He's a pretty amazing person. But I work for him, and yeah, so then I was tutoring this one young man, and he and I worked really hard to help him get better with his school and with his English. And his parents owned a recruiting company called East West. And by the way, his name's Jeffrey O'Hara, and he now, I guess I can throw a lot of plugs in here. He now has Tokyo Juice, which has several locations in town. Really good fresh juice. It's hard to get really, really good, recently made fresh juice, and they do that. So anyway,
We should put his link in the YouTube intro.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yes, the description there. Yes.
He better give me a free juice for that. But anyway,
Yeah.
Right.
so yes, I thought about it. I went, no, I'm going to be a teacher. And then I thought about it. I thought, well, my teaching isn't really going as I planned it. I guess I'm going to stay in Japan a while, and through recruiting, I can still help people, which is what I'm kind of all about. That's helping profession type person. So I did that, and that's how I got started. That's how I got started, and I'm still here.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
and you've been in the Tokyo area the whole time? Which part of Japan?
Yeah, I've lived in about 10 different places. I've lived in Shibuya, Asakusa, Ikebukuro, Suginami, Machida, Kinuta. Now I'm in Choku. Yeah, I've been all around, but mostly Tokyo, pretty much Tokyo area.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Mm.
And so then you transitioned into the wellness field.
Well, yeah, but let me explain that. That's relatively recently. So
okay.
I went to work at East West. I've worked for 4 recruiting companies in 27 years. I was at East West, and they gave me my start, and I'm really grateful for that. And then around the turn of I guess this is going to kind of be a recruiting and mental wellness, because to tell the story, I could tell you a little bit of the history of recruiting. Around 2000, the Japan recruitment market is really it's more like a developing country than an industrial. Not now, but at the time, around 2000, there were no contingency recruiting firms here until around 2000, which is amazing. No global contingency like the bigger brands. And I think it was because the Japanese market was just a tough nut to crack. And companies that made it kind of started up, as you all can understand, the companies that made it just started organically here in Japan. And then there were a couple of I think Hudson and Robert Walters were the first 2. And I went and helped. I went to Robert Walters 6 months after they opened doors. And helped them open up. And I was there for 5 years, and I got contacted by my still boss several levels above me at Robert Half. And I went over there, and I was their first employee in Asia for Robert Half, something I'm very proud of. And I went over to Half and started them up. And it was pretty thrilling there for a while. Starting up a business, and I have a lot of energy, and I was able to get people in the door, and we got rolling. And then the financial crisis hit. Two things happened. One, the financial crisis hit, and two, I'm a good startup guy, but I think when it comes to, look, going back to what I was talking about before, when you look at the pie for what a good recruiting professional or recruiting management professional is, there's a lot of things there. And one of those things is obviously affinity, relationships and things like that, things that come from, that I can pull from the helping profession. I'm great at that, but there's some other things that I'm not so good at. And I had challenges with the business as it transferred, as it started to move more past the startup phase. But also we got hammered by the financial crisis. And
all right,
I had to go back and work a desk and run the office, work a desk in an area of business, a contracting business that I didn't have a lot of experience with. I started it up, but I didn't do that much there. And I was overwhelmed. I was just massively overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do. And I don't even know how I did it, but I found this book by a guy named Stephen Houze, and it's called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. It's a workbook. And no, actually the workbook came later. This was just a regular book. And it talked about how to, and I'll get more into this later, but just for right now, I'll just say that it talked about how to use mindfulness and values to give yourself a little bit of clarity of mind and also purpose. So I'm sitting there in this job thinking I got a million KPIs. I got the office. I have to bill. I have to, everyone's back on a desk now because it's a tough market. What am I going to do? How am I going to do it? And so I basically started meditating and started doing some mindfulness exercises to kind of be more aware of my thoughts and my feelings. And then I also did some values exploration work where I first defined my values. I thought I knew what they were. I had no idea. So I defined my values, and then I came up with a plan. And I'm not a real complicated guy, and simple plans work best with me. And my plan was, I'm going to help 10 people a day. I'm going to help 10 people a day. I'm going to make their lives better. If it's a client, I'm going to help them with talent. If it's a candidate, I'm going to help them. I'm going to let them know that I'm going to work to help them get into a job so they can have some work in this tough time. So get kind of emotional even thinking about it because, because
I am too, just listening to you. I think
it means
that's
a lot.
So beautiful in its simplicity. That's very inspiring. Thank you for mentioning it.
Well, here's the thing. I did that, and the reality is, Tim, when you look at what I do every day, like in recruiting, we do the same things. You don't have 50 different things to choose from, really. You talk to people you talk to clients about talent, you talk to candidates or the consultants, and what I was doing, the consultants about jobs. You talk about solutions, but when you have meaning, when you have something really behind you, purpose and meaning, the way you do that, it's just a lot of, there's a lot of difference between, hi, Mr. Client, I've heard you're having a really tough time finding an FP&A person, and I have somebody that's excellent. They work in your line of business, and they've actually expressed an interest in your company. I'd really like to come talk to you about them. That's a lot different than, hi, do you have any jobs for me? There's a difference.
Right.
There's a difference, right? So I became one of the top salespeople globally in the business for several years from that, right? And then I did that, and I kept doing that, but something was kind of pulling. I was happy. I was glad to be doing that again, and to be, helping the organization again. But it was a tough time, and I've had a lot of people left the business. I felt horrible about that, but the time went by and I just kept feeling this pull throughout, because throughout all of this years, and one thing I didn't mention was at East West, at Walters, at Robert Half, I'd see so many people in the business that were really stressed out, because it's a stressful business.
I'll bet.
But also so many candidates. And the more I asked my clients, one of the things I started doing was asking my clients on a regular basis, so how's it going? How's your team? And when I felt right doing it, because it's not something you can do all the time, but when I felt comfortable and right, asking, how's the mental health of your team? And I didn't keep track of the numbers, but amazingly high number. Give you a little look, either give you a little look, or they say somebody's not showing up, or people are showing up, but they're not really present.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. So
yeah.
I kept thinking, and also when I was going through my just super stress, a lot of anxiety, and some depression, by the way, during 09 and 10, I didn't really know. I didn't look real hard, but I didn't really know where to turn. And I really wish that I would have got some coaching or therapy back then. I did later. I'm a big believer in it. So that just all of these things kept playing on me, and I just kept thinking. And a while back, I just said, well, I'm going to quit thinking about it. I'm going to do something about it. So I got my master's, and I got licensed in the state of Washington, and I set up MindBridge, which is my company, and I have a wonderful associate working with me right now, Mirai, and that's all I have for now. Any more questions?
Yeah. So, I was just interested. You mentioned, that you re-examined your own values, and you thought you understood what they were, and then upon reflection, you discovered new values. And that resonated, because I feel like I have thought about it and I think I know my values, but maybe I don't now. And so I was kind of curious, as only what you're comfortable sharing. What are some of the values that you discovered you had that you were never really on your radar before?
So and again, I'll relate this to other people, because when I ask people, I'll ask a group of people, are you familiar with your values? And maybe a few people, yeah, sure. I'm like, okay, what are your top 5 core values? I don't know. I don't think anyone's ever told me. There's a couple that had actually, I think just recently, someone that I've talked to, one of my clients, because I do corporate training and I do individual therapy, counseling, and coaching. And one person I just happened to do a value sort recently. But a lot of people, well, I'm kind and I believe in fairness, and then they pretty much stop there, and that's what I would have done. And that's when I first did mine, I was dismayed, because I thought, man, I'm in business and my values are so touchy-feely. My top 5 values, and I think they were pretty similar then. They might have been a little different, because I'm always looking at them. I keep my values list on my K-tie. I look at it. I write about one every day. But awareness, altruism, meaning, love, and self-worth. Right?
Right. Yeah.
It's not real, like competition and achievement. I mean, they're not real business, like a business stud.
Yeah. But
I mean, competing with yourself is, to me, the ultimate step I moved forward in my life as I got older. Because really, that's all that matters. Are you a better person than you were yesterday, right? And just, I guess I frame it differently. If you were asking me my top 5, I don't know if I'd want to rank them necessarily. You know what I mean? Because for me, in certain situations, a certain value comes to the fore. It's I don't want to say it's fluid, because they're there, but they're there. The importance of them, or the prioritization, can depend on whatever situation I'm thrown into. But I also think the fact that we all live in Japan,
right,
it forces you to question your own values, because you are observing another culture with different values, or at least different priorities. They prioritize maybe the same values differently, right? And it forces I would have never thought of it if I had never left my own country and lived here. But it really did force me to think about it. I took a course on American culture, by the way. That it was like a revelation to me. I never realized all these values that I took for granted as a culture, but also even personally, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
And I
Yeah,
want to add
so
something here.
I'm not
That's
debunking
awesome.
five
Listen,
values. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
thank you.
no, that's no, I love this is why I like just talking to as many people as possible, because I just learned some stuff from you, Tim. And definitely like what you say about ranking them, I totally get that. I have a hard time. I actually have more than 5. I say 5.
Right, right.
I have
Yeah.
more like 12. And even then, because I'm because like persistence and commitment are huge.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with
And
that.
it's
Yeah,
like I can't say they're not my top, so I totally hear you.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
Yeah, but
even that, sorry, Demaya, but just real quickly,
that's
even
right.
that, when I look at my bottom ones or some towards the bottom, it's stuff that I really like. Organization,
Yeah.
right? Especially now, I really need to be more organized than I've ever been in my life. So I need to kind of take a look at that. Go, okay, well, that maybe you don't value that value, but maybe you need to take a look at it, put a little bit more emphasis on
Yeah.
it. So,
I think it's really difficult for people actually to list their values. And I believe that we only become able to do that after we go through a difficult period of time or we receive some coaching or training. Because I remember at school, maybe last year, it was, I took, that was a leadership class. And then basically it was a class where they talked about values. So in every class we had to come up with something, and basically crystallize this or that. And I took actually not only one but maybe 2 or 3 classes like that, and it was so very difficult for me myself but also my classmates there to to find out what really these values were. And interestingly, though, for the younger classmates, it was more difficult than for the classmates with more experience. And I wonder why this happens. Is it because life experience, when you have more of it, you inevitably, it means that you have gone through more difficult periods for yourself or not? And of course, at the end of every class, one of the conclusions was that, as Tim said, we need to compete with ourselves, not with the people around us. Because when we compete with the people around us,
Yeah.
it leads to confrontation, it leads to aggression,
Stress.
crimes, or
It's stressful to
it's
always compare yourself to
yeah,
other
well,
people.
that's definitely me. I
yeah,
never do well when I look at other people.
yeah,
Better just going after working
You
but
know,
on.
yeah,
you also mentioned self-worth, and Maya and I have had this discussion offline. There's a lot of words being used today that when I was a kid were never used because I don't think there was an awareness. Like, for example, trauma was used when there was a big accident and everyone went to a trauma center. Like nobody thought about stuff happening to them as trauma. That was just like, oh, life sucks sometimes. You know what I mean? And I feel like same with validation. Okay, like I believe it's kind to validate people's feelings. I believe it's kind, but I also believe that the road to enlightenment is learning not to seek other people's validation to feed your own self-worth. And I was kind of raised that way without being told in those words, but it was more like, don't worry about what other people say. Don't be like part of the clique, do your own thing, and
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a
that's
little bit.
their way of saying don't seek validation in others. And I know it's super hard because we all want to be validated. Like I'm guilty of it too, But that isn't that what we're aiming for in the self-worth category?
So, David, you have
Yeah, sure. Yes.
yeah. No, I think you have 2 questions. One from Tim now, and then the other one, which I was wondering about, whether the amount of experience actually helps reach, or discover your values, or make the process a little bit easier or shorter.
I mean, it
Yeah.
would. Yes, just in a nutshell, I think yes. Although you do, obviously see I was talking to really young. More and more people are young to me these days, but early
Tell me
20,
about it.
early
Right.
early 20s lady. The lady, her name's Mariah Reynolds. Mentioning all these names, I hope none of them mind, but she works with me, and she has she's a good example of somebody who has a really good understanding of her, I think, of her values. And I'm jealous. When I was her age, I didn't know what was up. But yeah, so I think so that is amazing. But I think in general, it's just something that comes with experience, because you experience what you like and what you don't like, and what's important to you, what you don't, and you do that through. And like you say, the tough stories sometimes usually teach us values more than the easy ones. Just remember, it's a sad thing, but it's true that hard times usually teach us more than good ones do.
Yeah.
How about self-discovery? Like, don't you feel like people I'm still trying to figure out who I am. I'm getting closer, but I feel like it's an ongoing process because I learned stuff about myself. Like, oh my God, that was a blind spot, right? Figure out who you are authentically, like that. That's part of the process, right?
Yes.
You know,
I mean, I think that, figuring out who you are, and I think especially when I look at the type of act and the mindfulness and the values and everything, a lot of it is just kind of shedding a lot of the content that we add to things, the things that we add that don't work for us. And a lot of times it's figuring out who you are is a very, very simple process. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's actually pretty simple.
right on.
From the mindfulness.
We say, I think that after going through such tough times, we tend to think that, well, I wish I had known this before. And most of the time we don't, right? And that's why one of the reasons we struggle going through these tough times. And I wonder also whether this is something that we can learn earlier in life. Because once again, maybe that's the point of being coached, right? Or going through training and reading books as well about self-awareness, self-worth, and things that we discover on the way. Do you think, once again, I'm asking because, again, I have seen people at different stages of their lives, and for some people, it's really an ongoing battle. And we all go through this, but for some people, the battle is really more intense than for others.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, Maya, I think that's a good question, but let's quickly jump to our sponsor, and then we'll give David a little time to think about his response.
right.
Sure,
And we'll get back to that. I apologize. I normally let you know
No.
ahead of time.
Great. No, thank you, Tim, for that. And now we are going to say thank you to our other sponsor, Houze. They are also known as Houze Inc. You can find them online as well as houze.co.jp, or you can reach them via email through webmaster@houze.co.cjp. There, you'll find Hana Howell, who is another friend of ours. She represents the company, and the good thing is that if you are worried about your Japanese language abilities, you have no problem there because Hana is a fluent English speaker. So if you have any projects in mind in the fields of custom home design, construction, commercial building construction as well, please reach out to Hana. You'll find her contact details in the description of the YouTube video, or you can also find her on LinkedIn. So she's there, she posts there, she's another good friend of ours as well, and we feel really happy to be able to represent her and Houze Inc on this podcast. A big thank you again, and now we're going back to, the podcast, David.
Yep.
Yeah.
So pose that question again real quickly. You were talking about self-knowledge. Can you?
Yes, whether so, because for some people, I see people at different stages of their lives, right? And for
Right.
some people, the battle or the struggle is more intense than for others. And I wonder if we get some coaching when we are younger or before we have dived into those battles, do you think that we would be better equipped to deal with them and probably become wiser much sooner than if we didn't have coaching?
I think in a lot of cases that's true. You know, when I was, this is my perspective, but back in 2008, 2009, you know, I could have really used some coaching, counseling, therapy, could have really used it. And I was afraid. I didn't want people to know. And I think it's changed a lot since then, but I think it has a ways to go. I think it has a ways to go before people understand that it's something that can give you where you can learn about yourself and act on it, because it's important to act. Self-knowledge is great. It's really important. But if you don't do anything with it, you're not going to change. And I think that's what a lot of it, and that's why it's called ACT, even though it's an acronym: acceptance and commitment. There, because commitment, acceptance and commitment. So you accept whatever's there, and you commit to acting. So that's important. But I think definitely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying that it works for everybody, but I think that if most people get therapy and they have a little bit of willingness, they can definitely put positive change in their lives.
Yeah, I also, when you say young, Maya, how young are you talking about? When I think of young, I think of, you know, school children getting the tool. No, I mean, but getting the tools early on. But in my case, I wish I had the coaching before I had kids and even before I got married. But of course, you don't want to listen to anybody then. But, you know, that's the problem. That's the paradox, right? At least for me. But years later, when my kids were teens, I read a book for work. It was called Leadership and Self-Deception. Reading that book was like therapy for me. It blew my mind. I rethought about how I had like approached things, my children, everything. And it had this profound change on me, which almost had a similar feeling to therapy, but it requires a lot of self-reflection. And so I always thought, God, if I had a time machine, I'd go back in time and give myself this book before I got married. Yeah, I would have been a better father. I would have been a better husband. I would have, you know, so I never had therapy in that sense. I was fortunate to have close people around me who I were connected to, but I see the value even in this book, even though it technically wasn't therapy. So,
well, let me just throw this in there real quickly. I call the organizational side, I call corporate training, just because, you know, marketing is kind of challenging to figure out exactly how to label and market everything. But it really, I don't know if I'll change it or what, but it's really organizational because, well, I'm a guest teacher at Temple.
okay.
And I will, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I will adapt this for schools. And I mean, all the way to elementary school. Because it can be really fun for little kids. I think you could definitely put mindfulness, give young kid, simple mindfulness. I don't like to use the word seminars for little kids, whatever you want to call it. Playtime,
yeah. Playtime, yes. Yeah. It's important.
You can really do that just at just about any age. Yeah. So you get them started young.
Yeah. Good.
I'm going to do that.
I think that's wonderful. And still, I don't know really. I believe that in Japan, so basically every kindergarten and every school has their different program, right, for mindfulness. I would argue, though, that the Japanese culture is better at teaching that than our Western culture. And I'm not saying that there is no space for teaching or, you know, starting the kids early. I believe that it's very important, and not every school or kindergarten has gotten this right. But still, to me, from a cultural perspective, I believe that
Yeah.
because of uh, the
It's baked
collectivist
in, a lot
mindset,
of it.
yes, because of
Yeah.
the collectivist mindset and the group orientation, probably it's a little bit easier to teach that here in Japan because, as Tim says, it's baked in to the culture.
The awareness of people around you and how you're
Yes.
affecting them is baked in at such an early age. In America, I don't see that, you know.
That's interesting, and I agree. Here, and I'll add a little something to that. That's interesting. Mindfulness is just kind of, when you look at Japanese culture, it's so obvious that mindfulness, tea ceremony,
Yeah.
all about mindfulness, right? So many things
Yeah.
do. It's built in. However, in the classroom, like, or at work when I'm doing the training for groups, it's a different kind of and maybe I can take a look at this with my delivery, but it's a different kind of a thing. And when it's mindfulness is this thing that you teach, it doesn't soak in as well as what, even though Japanese people are used to that in their daily lives, like a lot of them, they don't actually meditate, things
Right.
like that, right? So it's different. So I'm kind of figuring that out. It's really interesting,
Yeah.
figuring out how to make that.
I also wonder, and please forgive my ignorance in this regard, but so in school we were taught to reflect a lot. So basically, self-reflection and reflection was something that we were asked to do a lot. And I wonder whether reflection, self-reflection, and meditation are the same thing. Are they different, and if they are different, is there an overlap? So, and also if they're different, how are they different? Maybe you can enlighten us here because I wonder about these things
If
nowadays.
if self-reflection and what are different, I'm sorry, it cut out a second.
And meditation.
Self-reflection and meditation,
Yeah.
they can be. There's a million different ways to meditate, and it's what I tell everybody is I'm not an expert. I've been doing it for 15 years. I practice different things. I don't trust people that say they're meditation experts, but I'm definitely not one. But you can meditate. You can meditate on. I think it's kind of difficult if you're following a bunch of different thoughts, but you can definitely meditate on one thought, on one positive thought. I don't really do that. I try to, I don't want to get in the weeds here with meditation, but I try and meditate. I try and focus on one of my anchors, or else I try thought diffusion, which is an ACT technique where you take a thought and kind of set it aside or put it on a vehicle and let it maybe move away, so then you can have more of a clear mind. But meditation, if you try to clear your mind, if your goal is to have a clear mind, it doesn't work. For the reason for that donkey, when you try and get rid of the donkey, it doesn't go away. When you try and have a clear mind, it doesn't go away. But so self-reflection is a little bit more active than what you usually do in meditation. You're actually thinking about this. What am I going to do? You're pondering and you're thinking. So while you might focus on one idea or one happy thought when you're meditating, your mind isn't usually that active. So I just took a long time to answer that. Sorry.
No, but
No, I meditate like now, probably over the last year more than I ever did before. But I just focus on breathing. But as somebody who has lived here for a long time, we start talking about words like meditate, okay? And you kind of alluded to it. You said it means different things. There's many different ways to do it, right?
Right.
Which begs the question, like, what is the definition of meditate? And so when I sit here and I breathe, I guess I'm meditating, but sometimes I'm playing my guitar and I almost get in this meditative state while I'm doing something or writing, or like, to me, I feel like Japanese almost meditate when they're doing their job, like, or
I guess some people would say, look, all of these definitions, one of the things that I do with my training and with my individual counseling as well, is I talk about different definitions and how, and there can, presence, awareness, mindfulness. I would say you're mindfully playing your guitar, right? But
Okay, maybe
you could call that a meditative state.
it feels like it. I feel like I'm in a flow.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not enough, but sometimes.
Yeah. To me, it happens when I take a walk, because when I walk, my thoughts flow without any what's that, motivation, or without urging them.
Just
Actually,
wander. Yeah.
it's just wandering. And actually, when I walk, I come up with some great ideas about work. So it's interesting, but I don't know whether I can call that meditation, but to a certain extent, it probably is.
But yeah, you're probably right, David. Mindfulness is probably a better description of it.
Again, so this is what I've kind of come up with through reading experience. But I tell this to when I meditate, like there's meditating where, and this is what a lot of people say, I don't like it. Can't stop thinking. I got all these thoughts just going, so that's where your thoughts are basically. That's this kind of meditation. Then there's meditation where the thoughts are going by, but not really bothering you. You see them, but you still kind of feel real calm. You have that great feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're observing yourself from as like almost like a third person.
You're kind of you've got some space from your thoughts, which is again when they talk about diffusion and fusions like this, and diffusions when you're able to separate, get some space, take all the all of the thought up. Well, here's basically ACT, diffusion, and fusion. ACT is like, I always use this one. My wife didn't call me. Okay. That's a fact.
Right.
My wife didn't call me because she didn't want to talk to me. My wife didn't call me because she doesn't want to talk to me because she doesn't love me. Right. That's what we do. Right. That's what we do to add content to our thoughts. And so a lot of times when we're grabbed by thoughts, something like that's happening. But when you've got some space and they're just kind of going above over here, we can take a look at them. Well, that's just that. I wrecked the car. Okay. Doesn't mean I'm a horrible person. I just wrecked the car. It happened. Right. Yeah. That's where we have some space. And then in meditation, if you can kind of relate it to that, I'm kind of wandering a little bit here, but meditation is, you got these thoughts that are just that have got a hold of you. Then they don't have a hold of you, but they're there, but space. And then the amazing, rare moments for me is when there's nothing. Yeah. And that's really where I don't get that every day. I meditate every day. I don't get it every day. But if I try to do that, I definitely don't do that. The irony is you only get it when you don't make that the goal. Yeah.
Right.
It works for me. I mean, maybe there's some people that can willfully do it. I don't know, but most people I know can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I have never been in a state where my mind has been empty, like, and I wonder whether I can ever get to that state, but who knows, really. Yeah.
I don't know. When I was a teenager, my head was pretty empty.
Yeah, I was
myself. I was clueless. I had no thoughts in that head. I don't know what I was thinking.
That's exactly.
No, but I was just I was alluding to this a little bit earlier about parents, and I agree. Like I would love to see kids at a young age, encouraged to be mindful and recognize stress and all these other things. But I really still believe the parents can have a huge impact on their children, helping their children develop. And I think there's a need there as it might apply to parenting.
Yeah.
Not only the parents, but how to teach the kids or how to set the example for the kids. Any of that type of work happening with you, David?
Not with me personally. I deal with adult. I mean, I'm totally on board with what you're saying, and I would say probably there could be a lot more emphasis on that because that's so important. Obviously how people are raised and their upbringing, but yeah, if there's some fostering of that, teaching parents. I know there's the mental health field in Japan is it's grown a lot. I'm on a website called IMHPJ, International Mental Health Practitioners Japan, a really good group of people, a really solid group of professionals. It's growing now, but it's still very small. I'm not real educated on what exists for Japanese speakers. IMHPJ is English speakers or English and Japanese. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people whose Japanese is still pretty poor after only 30 years here. So I work with English speakers only, but I don't see a lot of in the family therapy area. I could be wrong, but I definitely think what you're talking about would be so awesome if there could be more of an emphasis on teaching it to parents or even family units.
I wonder if it could be rebranded to just remove mental health from the label and just call it family coaching or coaching for excellence, or more of a positive twist.
That's what I was going to say.
That's weave it in.
That's what I was going to say, is that part of the, when I talked about the stigma, when I was looking for some coaching or therapy, that I think a lot of people really, really see mental health. Oh, that means something's wrong with me. That's one reason why I use mental wellness, because that sounds, I think, a little bit better than
better. Yeah.
But it's just about learning skills. It's about learning emotional regulation. It's about learning how to better have relationships, about how to better deal with our thoughts. It's not necessarily somebody, and more and more people that don't have anxiety, depression, trauma, substance abuse. They don't have those issues, and they're still seeking it out. I think that's just awesome.
Yeah. Now that I'm retired, I realize how much stress I put up with in my life. Once you leave it, you're like, oh my God, I was stressed. And we've had this discussion before. I believe that there is healthy stress that can propel you to better things. And then there's toxic stress, and differentiating between those two. And I guess it would be what you can control, learning to focus on areas of stress, but it's within your control to relieve it, versus areas of stress that are out of your control. No matter what you do, you can't control it. Maybe that's the trick. But absolutely. I always felt like stress was like being in a playing sports, being in a basketball game. You're stressed. You're trying to stop him. He's trying to stop you, but it's fun. Absolutely. But at what point does that break?
Right. Well, I think the simple answer to that is, as long as it's a motivator, as long as it's positively pushing you and you're it's it's healthy physically and mentally. But when it starts to impede you, and when it starts to turn into a lot of rumination and unhelpful thoughts, and it starts to to hold you back and make it harder for you to do what you're doing because you feel so badly about yourself, then it's not helpful anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I used it as fuel, but I still was good at torturing myself over it a little bit. But that made it my fuel.
But that was still, it was still motivating you, though.
I have to, like, that's kind of how I'm wired.
Right.
It was survival. Like I had a family. I had a family to take care of. I needed to get money in the door. Right? So I didn't really have a choice to do nothing. And for me, like, I quit smoking when I was young because I guilt tripped myself into doing it. I was like, I'm a horrible person, so I better quit. And that motivated me. That's the hardest thing I ever did too, quitting smoking, So what I'm saying is stress has been good for me, but I can see that it has also damaged me and made me worry too much about stuff that turned out okay. But maybe it turned out okay because I was worried, at least some of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not the only person I've heard say that smoking's the toughest thing.
For me, it was so hard.
Met a lot of people who, you know, in my life, due to my past and everything, who had issues with drugs and alcohol. And so many people say that smoking's the hardest thing to do to quit.
Yeah, it was. For me, it was. But I did it, and I was proud of myself, but I had to shame myself. You know.
What were you going to say, Maya? Were you going to say something?
No, I was going to say that basically, personally, for me, going through stressful periods, I have gone through maybe really hard 2 or 3 periods, which lasted for a couple of years each. And it was very tough. So the stress in the beginning was a motivator. And then it turned out into a demotivator, and eventually I had to reach very deep down into myself and turn that stress into a motivator once again, so that I could leap, you know, take the leap, because it was a leap, you know, and taking risks, leaving what I was doing and jumping into an entirely different thing. And it was really tough, but I believe that for me the curve has been a V-shaped curve, you know, when I went through those periods, to eventually turn it into what is that, a mountain-shaped curve, you know. But going through the V, the lowest period, was really, really tough.
Yeah.
And that's when
basically
I had to reach deep down into myself and realize the very first time when it happened that the only person I could rely on was myself. And it depended on me to get out, you know, to push myself up and do something. And that's where I believe we realize that we don't need to be validated by others. The only validation we need is our own validation of ourselves. But it's a tough thing to go through.
Don't let others define your self-worth.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the process, because some people do, and I've had issues with that myself.
We all have those tendencies.
I had to work through it, you know. But definitely, there's major validity in what you're both saying. But I think it's just a question of where individuals are with that at any given moment.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah.
No, I love I love that you were helping 10 people a day. That really stuck in my head. That's just such a beautiful sentiment and daily goal that, you know, it makes you more aware. If that's your goal, you're going to be looking for opportunities to proactively do kind things for people or help them in some way. And I think if everybody tried to do that, just think about everything, like even at a team level.
The values thing is such a when we kind of touched upon this and we moved away, but I think that one of the things that I want to work more on with the people I work with with my training and developing more is, like, I'm in the midst of developing some where it matches individual values to corporate values, because I think that the deal is to find the match. And I'm not saying I'm going to try and get people to leave their companies, but to find the match. And if there is absolutely no match, then you can maybe make a decision based from there. But I think that there's a lot of ways to find, again, how my values don't sound like business at all, but I made a way to make it work. And if you really just can't, then you can make a decision based upon that. But I think there's a lot of ways to look at to values matching. And so I look forward to doing more of that.
Good. And, you know, I worked a lot with Honda and Toyota to a degree, and I worked with Big Three. And one of the Americans that worked for one of the Japanese big manufacturers said to me, I used to work for GM. Nobody ever talked about company values, ever. Like, I never heard about it. It was like, make a profit next quarter. He goes, I come to, you know, this company, and I had a class on the company's values. We have to contribute to society and add value and protect the environment and treat all our associates with dignity. And Toyota's is before we make cars, we develop people. People are our most valuable asset because those cars come from the hearts and minds of people who value quality. Like they laid out these values to people. And even as a consultant in the late 80s, I was training companies about these values and how important they were to keep everybody focused. So I think some Japanese companies clearly advertise those values.
Yeah,
That's
they
awesome.
do. Yes, they do.
So it
And
exists.
that's, yes, it
Yeah.
exists in some Japanese companies. And I would say that there is a push nowadays, if you allow me to go a little bit into the business side of this, that there is a push nowadays for the Japanese companies to get closer in their business processes to the Western companies, especially to the American companies. And I understand that in terms of governance, it's necessary to a certain extent, of course. But at the same time, I don't want to see Japanese companies abandon
Yeah.
doing that, Tim, what you just
Right.
said.
Yeah. It's that collectivist mentality, contribute to society. And again, this is not altruistic. This is long-term practical thinking. If society is
Yeah.
healthy and they're thriving, then we as a business can sustain as long
Yeah.
as we're adding value. So it's very strategic, but it's good for society, or at least that's the intent. So
Yeah.
I agree. I think we need more companies like that.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So we
Yeah.
have come to the point
Wow,
of,
that was fast. Yeah.
Point of no
yeah,
return.
this was fast. Yes, it's
That
9
was
o'clock.
fast. Yeah, I made it. I survived.
No, it was great. Thank you. It was really fun.
No, thank you, David. And
Yeah, you
I
made me think about a lot of stuff.
a lot of stuff. And yes, when you make people think and consider the situation or different situations from different angles, that's when you get results at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I thank you so very much for telling us about what you do and the difficult points there, the struggles, and the revelations as well, the values that we need to find in ourselves and be mindful and everything. So thanks so much for this. And I know that it was also an emotional session for you as well. I apologize if it was a little bit too much for you. It wasn't by design. And once again, because of this, all the more, I appreciate you being with us and talking with us, just as three friends sitting here and doing that.
It was great. I had a great time. I mean, I don't mind showing. I don't mind showing me. That's a big part. That's you can definitely. I don't know. It's my philosophy that you can definitely do this with what I'm doing these days. So I'm happy to do it, and I think things are gonna develop fairly quickly. And I hope to come on again in the future and give you an update.
So if people are interested in your services, and we'd love to have you back, but is there a place they can go to see what your services are, like a website or LinkedIn or whatever?
I don't have anything on LinkedIn yet. I'm very slow, but I have my recruitment LinkedIn profile, but that's for recruitment. But
Gotcha.
www.mindbridge.life, LIFE, which
Okay.
that's my
We'll
website.
put that in the. We'll put that in the.
Yes, I will post it. Yes, it
Yeah,
will
we'll post it.
Yes, it will be included in the description. Yes.
Okay, that
So
has my corporate and my individual therapy.
Yes, just
Right.
one question. If people want to connect with you, even though it is not about recruiting, can they still reach out to you on LinkedIn and send you a direct message there?
Yeah, I'm gonna post. I guess this one thing about this with social media is this gonna post on my on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Yes.
And then I can write something on top of that. Yeah.
You can share it to your
You
network.
can, yes, to your network.
I'm like LinkedIn number 120,000 user. So I go way back. I don't have near as many connections as I should, but I'm still pretty big on LinkedIn. So if people want to reach me on LinkedIn, they're fine to do it.
Right on.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, great. And to everybody who watched us, listened to us, and stayed with us, thank you very much for doing
Thank
this
you,
on this
everyone.
Wednesday
Yeah.
morning. It's the first day of this winter, which is going to feel really warm, and we hope that you enjoy this midweek. So, thanks a
Yeah.
lot again to you, David, and we wish you a great, great Wednesday. And before we say goodbye once again, feel free to reach out and connect with David on LinkedIn or visit his website, which is www.mindbridge.mindbridge.life.
MINDBRIDGE.life.
It will be included in the description of the video as well. And also let us know your thoughts. If you want to share them with us, feel free to do that on LinkedIn, YouTube, maybe Facebook as well. And now, once again, a big thank you to our sponsors. And that's all from for today. We'll see you next time again.
Bye-bye.